This valuable knowledge, this valuable knowledge is only transmitted from one generation to another generation by oral means only. No documentation is there. You have to conduct exploration. Exploration studies are intensive and extensive tour trips or field visits you have to conduct at their habitations as well as forest areas, and you have to draw the information. We have to draw the information from directly from those people, that is tribal people, those who are practicing, those who are practicing. This is called first hand information. It should not be a second person or third person. So you have to draw the information. You can get the information directly from the ethnic people, those who are practicing. That is said to be the first hand information. So you have to collect the first hand information by extensive and intensive explorations at tribal habitations as well as forest areas. So this is the first objective. And the second objective is, you can write it down. Then I will explain. Second one, collection, comma, identification and documentation of plants by tribals. Collection, identification and documentation of plants used by the tribals, used by the tribals for 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 purpose, for purpose such as, for purpose such as food, shelter, medicine, veterinary use. Veterinary use, this is most important because they are associated with the farm animals and some cattle and some domestic animals. They also practice uh, some practice or use of practice with plants to their cattle. So thus these practices comes under veterinary practices. So veterinary use and magico religious beliefs in every stage of their life. I will repeat it. Collection, identification and documentation of plants, used by tribal people for various purposes such as food, shelter, medicine, veterinary practices and and మ్యాజికో రిలీజియస్. మ్యాజికోకి రిలీజియస్కి మధ్యన హైపన్ పెట్టండి. మ్యాజికో రిలీజియస్ బిలీవ్స్, మ్యాజికో రిలీజియస్ బిలీవ్స్ in every stage of their life, in every stage of their life. So this is the second objective. What is the second objective? You have to identify the plant as a botanist, and you have to collect the plant specimen in the form of herbarium or in the form of photograph. You have to collect those genetic resource, evidence of the genetic resource, and you have to record the various purposes they have used, such as what purposes, such as they used for food, or they used for shelter, or medicine, or veterinary practices, or even in magico religious practices. How the plant is used by those particular tribe. All those you have to record it. So this is the second objective of the ethnobotany. And the third one, The third one, you can write it down: taxonomic analysis, taxonomic analysis, and systemic evolution, and systemic evolution of drug yielding plants. I will repeat it. I repeat it. Some disturbance is coming. Taxonomic analysis and systematic evolution of drug yielding plants. So, being a botanist, you have to give you have to give a sufficient place, efficient place is nothing but a classification, that you have to analyze that plant systematically, taxonomically. You have to follow any one of the system of classification. You can follow any one of the system of classification, like Bentham and Hooker system of classification, or even the most recent system of classifications, such as phylogenetic system of classifications, such as Hutchinson or Engler and Frankel. You can follow any one of the system of classification, whatever you likes. But of course, while we identification and collection in the field, in the direct field, the Bentham and Hooker system of classification is more favorable and more useful. And mostly, this Bentham and Hooker system of classification is only followed by most of the taxonomists for their taxonomic analysis. So, while we collect document identification of plant, you have to give the systematic analysis of those plants, and you have to give the drug evaluation, drug yielding plants. So, this plant, how the drug is evolved, what drug is evolved from this plant, what is the active principle that is involved in this plant, is there any chemical constituent is there, what is that chemical constituent, is there is alkaloid, or is a flavonoid, or is a resin, or is a terpenoid, what kind of chemical constituent is there, you have to analyze. So, recent studies of ethnobotany includes those angles, not only simply identification and documentation of plant. You have to go for its detailed taxonomic analysis, detailed taxonomic analysis, and you have to go for systematic evaluation of that drug yielding plant. When the plant is yielding a particular drug, what is that drug? What is the crude drug? From this crude drug, what is the phytochemistry is there? What is the main principle is there? Hence, I told you in the scope of ethnobotany, the studies of ethnobotany or ethnobotanical studies provides the development of pharmacognosy, phytochemistry, ultimately pharmaceutical industries. So that for the pharmaceutical industry, these ethnobotanical studies are base. So ethnobotanical studies are the base for the development of pharmaceutical industries. Why? Because an ethnobotanist must have identify the medicinal plant first. Then a phytochemist or a pharmacist will be evaluate that drug. First of all, an ethnobotanist has to go into the field and he has to identify the plant, he has to collect the plant, he has to analyze the plant systematically. Then only it is possible to evaluate the drug by a chemist or a phytochemist or a pharmacologist. So, the ethnobotanical studies are the basis for the drug evaluation. For the drug evaluation, studies are the basis for the drug evaluation. So, this is the point here. This is the major objective of the ethnobotanical studies. This, Then next one, to study the impact of tribal culture on forest and vegetation. So you have to note it down as next point. What is that? To study the impact of tribal culture on forest and vegetation. So this is the most important aspect in respect of threat to biodiversity. Threat to biodiversity. What is the threat here? When the ethnic people or tribal people are depending mostly on plants for every need, what will happen? The original plants or original genetic resources may be lost. If they use those plants, though if they use leaves, there is no problem. If they use flowers and seeds, what will happen? If they use flowers and seeds, what will happen? The propagation problems will be arise. No further propagation. If they used these seeds and fruits, flowers, that is propagative parts or the sexual parts may be used if used by the tribal people, no propagation. So the what much of impact is there by the from the tribal people on the environment and forests and vegetation. You have to calculate it. You have to study that use of use of and practices by the tribal people of plants entirely for every use. What are the impact? We have already studied the that one, that is environmental impact assessment. So, what is the impact on the environment as well as vegetation and forests? So, you have to assess. After assessment, you have to give possible methods of control. Possible methods of control. You have this is also the main objective of the ethnobotanical studies. And the next one, analysis of analysis of different ethnic tribes. Analysis of different ethnic tribes. You know how many of ethnic tribes are there? 480 in India, 35 or 33 in Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh. You have to each community or each tribal community has their own religious and cultural aspects. They are different from one another, so that you have to analyze. You have to analyze those tribal people in respect of their ethnology. So this word is also you have introduced ethnology. What includes ethnology? Ethnology is nothing but their lifestyles. You have to study their lifestyles and analyze from one ethnic group to another ethnic group. So this is also the main objective of ethnobotany. And finally, you have to suggest probable methods, probable methods to tribal people. Write down. You have to suggest or to suggest probable methods of conservation, conservation, preservation, cultivation, cultivation, and economic measures, measures for the welfare of tribal people, for the welfare of tribal people. So these are the main objectives. What is the this objective, main objective? How many objectives have came? I think nearly five objectives have came. Five objectives have came. What is the last one? Last one, you have to suggest probable methods, probable methods to conservation of the genetic resources, prevention of the genetic resources, cultivation of the genetic resources. They have to cultivate, and economic methods. If they cultivate, if they cultivate their economic, if they cultivate and produce, they produce those crops. They can generate the they can generate the revenue. So their economic status will be high. Economic status will be high, and their poverty will be eliminated. Their poverty will be eliminated if they are enriched with money by cultivating some ethnobotanical important plants or some medicinal plants. What will happen? Their economic status will be improved. So you have to give, or you have to suggest probable methods to cultivate these ethnobotanically important plants, and how can they conserve. You can give some methods, suggestions, for conservation methods. You can give some suggestions for cultivation methods. Thereby you can see their welfare. So these are all useful their welfare. Useful their welfare. So these are the objectives of ethnobotany. Understand? This is for today's class.